Hi there. Hi, please welcome Martin Scorsese.
Hey, thank you.
All right. Well, finally, congratulations. We have paying customers, Marty, for this
You
movie.
paying for this? Wow, that's nice. That is great. It is Saturday night.
And you've been working on this film.
Can't fool me.
You've been working on this film a long time, putting it together, and it must feel great to have it back and to have it in theaters with these big screens and the way.
Well, in this Dolby Vision?
Yeah.
That was fantastic, yeah. Dolby, beautiful. No, I've been working on it we started around 2017, and started working on the script with Eric, and then Eric Roth, and then took it into, I think what really happened, the big shift was we were approaching the subject from the structure of the book by David Grant, which is an excellent book. But the subtitle of the book is The Birth of the FBI, and it is really interesting how the FBI was formed and how the Osage murders and the Reign of Terror was the pivotal element that created what became Hoover's FBI. However, in the early 20s, at that time it was called the Bureau of Investigation, and that coupled with my great admiration and love for the American Western genre, that had me.
It's your first Western, really.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it is a Western. I guess it is. For me, for example, 1921 is only like 30 years ago. In my mind, because like when I grew up in the 50s, the 20s was like the 90s are to you. Get it? So it's like, when I was putting the film together, I said, oh, you know, it's 100 years ago. I said, what? How did that happen? You know, all the cars and different, of course I get that. But in any event, I mean, what happened was that we worked on the picture and worked on the script from the basis of the Bureau of Investigation coming in and solving this mystery. But when I was when I was working on the script, ultimately, I just knew that the minute they got off that train, the moment they did that and they looked around, we know who did it. You know, and I always say, it wasn't for me, it wasn't a matter of who did it, who didn't do it is really what's interesting. And so then it becomes a story of complicity and how we can allow ourselves, myself, everyone, I would think, it's in our nature, to sometimes let things slide or ignore, or even become unwittingly, or you know, you just weakness, you become part of the system, which is beyond unjust. It becomes like genocidal. You start. I am always fascinated by European cultures in different countries between 1919 and 1933, 36, and how that happened. And so, how could such cultured civilization, how such a cultured civilization could turn that way? In any event, for me, we finally got to work on the script, and we got the script to a point, but we were also meeting with the Osage. We go out to Oklahoma and meet with them, and we became very, very close with them. I was very concerned because I knew that the Osage would be very, very sensitive as to how they're going to be portrayed. They don't want to be portrayed just as victims or as cliches and that sort of thing. But I got to know them a bit, and there was a number of people talked about, a couple of people got up, and don't forget that once we were out in Oklahoma, the people who were giving us, creating these dinners for us, and you know, having us meet everyone in regalia and everything, there was some caution, you know, because of the kind of films I'm known to have made, in terms of the violence in my films and that sorts of things. But there were a few people who saw silence too, and temptation to Christ. And so, I don't know, man, it was like, you know, there was they would get up and during these dinners and talk and make speeches, not speeches, but explain stories and things that happened to them, meaning their their grandfathers, their uncles, their aunts, and I'm realizing, of course, these are the people. The people in the film you see here, and a lot of them in front of the camera, especially the scenes in the roundhouse where Everett Waller is the associate chief there. He's talking about, your babies. We rode our warriors over our dead babies. And when the Osage are out there dying, you don't let them die alone. All that's improvised. And he just went on. We put 2 cameras on him and he wailed, and he just, what this is, they're still there. The families are still there. The families of the Burkharts and the Roans, or the Roan horses they're called now, are still there. And they're all still living there together. So apparently a lot of this stuff was not talked about until we brought this film together.
No, it was a revelation to me, and I think it's incredibly relevant for right now, for these times, a sober reminder that history can repeat itself.
Well, history does repeat itself. That's why every generation is supposed to be schools. Yeah. In some families and schools. And that's why teaching is the most important occupation, I think, in the world. And you have great teachers. You can go back to ancient Greece, and you got, Aristotle, and he was a teacher. He may not agree with everything he said, but he was a teacher. So the thing is, we found that Margie Burkhart gets up. She's the great-granddaughter, I believe, of Ernest, the real Ernest, and she said, you forget. She said she saw silence like that, and she was talking to about 200, 300 of us at dinner. She said, don't forget, said, how you depict us. Remember that they were all friends. And she said, Ernest and Molly remember this, she says, Ernest and Molly were in love. Yeah. And that's what stuck in my head. Not only that, but another guy, Tom Wilson Pipestem, who was also a lawyer, he was resistant, and he was complaining to me about, you don't understand yet, you don't know what's going on here, da, 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 da. In a good way. It wasn't attacking me, but he said, you have to understand a little of the cultures. You've got to understand, Bill Hale and Henry Roan were best friends. They were best friends. It reminds me, I said, that's fascinating. It isn't like, let's kill this guy, we get his insurance money. What is that about? How did that all work? How did they all live together? And in many, many cases, respect and love one another, and still this happens because of the culture clash, because of the European civilization. As the Undertaker tells Ernest, he goes, come on, you can go get more money. It's not even your money, it's your wife's money. He said, don't tell me about what we're charging. We're charging them a little more money because they don't work for it. We come from a world where you sow and you reap. The good Lord gives you a blessing when you do good work, or you just do work and you provide for your family. That's your blessing. They don't work. They get the oil in the ground. How do they deserve? They don't deserve that. They're not even up from us. They don't even believe in the God we believe in. And actually they do, but it's a whole other issue. I was trying also to show on the white side that thinking, the fact that they charge, and I always point out like this, they charge, they begin to realize that the Osage or the Native American, I guess you can say, again, I don't want to speak out of turn, but especially at that time, they used to trade. So it isn't about paper money. So if you charge that, say, well, a guy comes in, Henry Roan comes in, he says, how much is that glass of water? $2, you pay it. A month later, he comes back, have some water, and say, well, now it's $1.50, he'll pay it. 6 months later, you say, hey, listen, it's $20 now, he'll pay it. They don't argue. So why can't you take a little of the profit? I mean, you got kids, you're trying to feed a family, and they didn't work for the money anyway. This is the thinking that begins to corrupt. And I think this has a lot to do with what we are and who we are. I'm not saying you out there in the audience, I'm talking about our culture and how I do believe for all the ideals of how our country was put together, and I agree with them. And I know some people who are related to the founding fathers, and they all really had a plan. It was a plan, but there's also this other side of it, which was ruthless. Don't forget, the Osage started in Missouri. They got thrown out of Missouri. They go to Kansas. They got thrown out of Kansas. They actually, the only Native American nation that bought their land in, they thought, the worst place ever.
Right.
They thought it was, they said there's all rocks here, you can't, said the white man's not gonna be able to put the iron in the ground, meaning the railroad. So we'll make it work, but they lived very, very harshly until the oil was discovered. It was just, they happened to choose a place to live or and buy it from the Cherokee. That turned out to be oil fields, and they became the most, well, they became the richest people per capita.
It was,
in the world.
it was amazing. It was like James Dean and Giant.
Oh yes, well that's his Giant, the whole thing with the oil coming down. Come on.
Isn't that crazy?
You'll never forget that. You know?
I know, right? I know. Leonardo DiCaprio, the 6th film, number of films obviously made with him. Robert De Niro, 10th film. Amazing collaborations that you have with these actors. You keep going back to the well, as it were. What's the magic of working with them? And this is the first time all 3 of you have worked together.
Yes, I think, De Niro introduced or talked to me about, or I should say recommended Leo to me when he did his only other film with Leo, which was
This Boy's Life.
This Boy's Life. And we were talking about something. He said, by the way, I just did this film, This Boy's Life, with this little kid. He's really good. You're gonna have to work with him someday. And we eventually got to meet. We got to make Gangs of New York, etc. And we formed a good collaboration on The Aviator, the film I made after that, and especially on Departed. But in any event, one of the reasons I work with Leo is he's looking at the material with me, and I'm looking at the script, and we're trying to get this epic off the ground. I guess you can call it an epic. That's a Western. That in my mind is not really a Western, is it? And all these questions about the Osage and the Bureau of Investigation. And finally, at one point, he was supposed to play.
He was supposed to play the Jesse Plemons.
Jesse Plemons is part Tom White, and I always, with Eric Roth, we were trying to give it a spin in a way to make it something more than what we normally see in that type of role, but we really couldn't find it. And we took it right to the edge. We worked for, while I was doing Irishman 2, during the post-production of Irishman and everything, all through COVID. And I finally, Leo turned to me, and this goes back to what Marty Burkhart said. He said, where's the heart of the movie? I said, the heart is Molly and Ernest. He goes, well, why don't I play Ernest? I said, yeah, okay, if you play Ernest, we take script, rip it open. Take from center of script, turn it inside out. And that will take another 6 months or so. But we were ready, but COVID, it was almost over. And we were beginning to work. I was still working while COVID was going on. But basically, once we had the financing from Apple and Paramount came back into the picture as distributor, we in effect, along with Eric and a number of other people, we in effect continued to work on the script until last day of shooting.
Can I tell you, by the way, you said Paramount came back in. They were the original studio.
They like the first version.
And then Apple came in and financed and all of that, and then Paramount's distributing it. And this proves this weekend, because it's doing extremely well.
I don't know, I'm afraid to listen.
No,
please. I can't take it, I'm too old.
It proves again, as I keep saying, there is an audience for important movies, you know?
Oh, I mean, look,
in theaters.
I know, in theaters. The thing, I don't know about the original, I hope. Important, I don't know. It turns out that I just found that they were really interesting, and how could all these people, and how could we have done that? I know it. And I remember being, my first experience with the Native Americans was in 1974 at Pine Ridge Reservation. I was supposed to do something. They sent me there, and I was traumatized. I didn't quite understand being, you know, a kid, I just made Mean Streets only, and I didn't, in my mind, I thought the American Western represented how everything was supposed to be. You know, I didn't know that part of history. I knew another part. I come from New York, urban, it's a whole more Mediterranean, Sicilian, Neapolitan areas. I understand more of that, more English, some French history, but not the American history. And I was shocked by what I saw, and also what had happened. It was a very difficult experience, and it stayed with me for years. And so that's why I didn't throw myself and say, we're gonna make an important picture. I'm just gonna make a picture.
Yeah.
You know? And if it turns out to be, and I think it has, turned out to be something which resonates about who we are as a culture, and it's good to know what we are, what we did, how we did it, or the thinking of it. You know, America, are we that different from America of the 19th century? You know, of the famous Indian fighters. You know, if you read Blood Meridian, Cormac McCarthy's book. Just take a look at that. Based on a guy called the Judge. The Judge wore a bare coat, like Leo wears in Revenant. And he was a famous, what they called Indian fighter. This guy was a savage. I mean, and he was a hero. He was a hero to the point where the last novel that Herman Melville wrote, The Confidence Man, he's one of the characters. You know. So in any event, I'm glad that in a funny way it's open, and we see that it's maybe beginning a dialogue to come to terms with, you know, it's okay, come to terms with it. It's part of who, it would, I think, enrich our culture and our children's culture to come to terms with all this.
You know, before we go, we have to go because you're going to.
Is there another screening?
You got another screen.
I have to, what?
One that you're going to introduce. But I have read several articles all this week. Martin Scorsese's films ranked 1 through 20. All of you know, what's your favorite? All of that. How do you react when you see, or do you look at that? You know, because the movies you've made are iconic. So.
But I can't look. I mean, I don't even know where. It's so strange. Where are we? I mean, we turn back, all of a sudden it's 50 years.
Yeah.
You know, and people think, oh, you get old, you expect age to take over. No, you get old. I mean, you're old, but you're still young, I think.
Yeah, you are.
You're still curious, if you can be. A lot of people don't, that's fine, but I still am. So in a funny way, it's like I'm still the guy who wound up in Pine Ridge in 74. So for me, I don't know how you would rank. It depends on how you see films. In other words, how you see a person's work. Like I was able to see the first films by, let's say, Fellini, Federico Fellini in Italy, and I saw them all as they came out, you know, in order. I didn't see the last one first, you know, and it depends on how you would, what the film, if the film still has some resonance for you in your life as you grow. If it's the same film and you see it 25 years later and it means more to you, then it has some value.
So many of them do. If I told this audience, yell out your favorite Martin Scorsese film, I bet they'd do it. Wouldn't you?
Taxi driver.
Good guys down here, all right.
I love it. See, okay. Everybody's got one. Thank you, Martin Scorsese.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. We ask you to please stay in your seats while our special guests exit. Please remain seated for just a brief moment. If you please remain seated, we really appreciate that. Thank you so much.